Namaste. I welcome you all for this webinar. Yogashri Raghuramji. He has been a student of yoga and spirituality from his younger days. Ever since he has devoted his life to a cause he strongly believes in, the spread of holistic approach of yoga and spiritual knowledge all over the world. As an international ambassador for SVASA, Raghuramji has been traveling the globe for past 3 decades guiding seekers and researchers in the field of yoga. He is widely popular among his students. He is known for his wit, wisdom, and generosity in his teachings. He is also the founder of Yoga Bharati. I now request Raghuramji to take the session.
World Health Organization defined yoga as they wanted to give a direction to the whole approach of health, because that's supposed to be health organization. They wanted to bring about a different perspective to the health. They said that the focus should not be sickness, the focus should be the health. So that is what they wanted to give. So therefore that they have defined the idea. Health is not just absence of sickness, but it is a positive well-being at the physical, mental, social, and spiritual level. So that means to say, you see very clearly this definition, it shows that our focus has been about the sickness, but not about health. And now he wanted to see that this particular focus is moved from sickness to health. That's why he said that health is not mere absence of sickness, but it's a positive well-being at the physical, mental, social, and spiritual level. The whole definition has evolved because the simple reason that human being is positive well-being is always there. We have positive health. And why not we start from that? An average man has got a very positive health. Like a simple thing is that at this point of time, if suddenly that somebody requires a liter of blood, can you not denote it? You can donate it. And then all that you need is a glass of orange juice, and then you are fit enough. So that means that 1 liter of extra blood is a positive well-being that you have. Similarly, if somebody needs 1 kidney, you can donate 50%, 1 kidney is extra with you. Is it not a positive well-being? Similarly, like that, if you go without food for a couple of 2-3 days because of some emergency, you can still survive. There's so much of extra food is there in our body as it is. We don't die. Like that, everything is like that, including you can give your artery and you can replace your artery with this. So like that, so much of positive well-being. But psychologically, we don't feel that. You ask anybody, how are you doing? They'll say, managing. What is this managing? We should be feeling that I'm really positive, but that answer does not come. Yeah, there's no other problem. I don't have any problem. Like that. I feel the positive well-being at the simple level is the physical level. But then later on, when Sigmund Freud came onto the scene, first time they realized it's not just a positive well-being at the physical level, but we also have to have a positive well-being at the mental level. Because Freud came and said man is not just only physical body, but it's also mind. So we should have both body and mind and a positive well-being. Many times what happens is people may be having a very good positive well-being at the physical level, but mind may be completely screwed up. And such a person, we cannot call him as supposed to be healthy. In fact, people who are patients in the mental hospital, their positive well-being at the physical is so much that to take care of 1 mental patient, you require 4 normal healthy persons. So that is his positive well-being at the physical level. So positive well-being at the physical and mental, both these things are important. But then it was in 1940s that they realized that only these 2 are not sufficient. You should also have positive well-being at the physical, mental, and social well-being. This component is very important because we have seen the visitation of such people in 1940s or before that, who are physically very strong, mentally very good, but imagine what is the kind of social being for them, behavior for them. A person who killed 3 million Jews, a person who killed lakhs of people, Genghis Khan, or it is Hitler, how can we say them that they are healthy human being? So therefore, they added that definition saying that the positive well-being at the physical, mental, and social level. Later on in 1970s, one of the doctors from India, he went to WHO and said this definition is not sufficient. You should add one more parameter, and that's what is a spiritual well-being. Why do we need one more parameter? We need that parameter because you see that the forest dogs, they are so strong, social well, physically strong, mentally alert, and then they're socially so strong that these dogs get together in form of a group of 15, 20 dogs. They can attack a lion or a tiger. That means that positive well-being at the social level is so strong. Look at the ants, their social well-being is so strong. Such tiny ants, they pick up the sugar cube and they carry all the way to store in the house inside the hole, not for themselves. They don't have that selfish motive. It is for the ant community they store. That is the reason why in ants you don't find 2G, 3G scams. They're very happy about that. And look at the bees. They collect tiny droplets of that honey from various flowers and then keep it inside the honey comb. And there basically it is for the sake of the honeybee community. See, in ants you see that social well-being, in dogs you see social well-being, in birds you see social well-being, and in human being also, if you have that social well-being, what is more about human being than all these other species? Therefore, we have to add one more thing. And that answer was, that argument was convincing. Immediately they said, okay, we should add that. And he proposed about the spiritual well-being. They said, we added this, and then they felt that they have solved the problem. But actually that created a problem. What was the problem it was created was that a physical well-being, you have all this measurement that are there. BP should be like this, cholesterol should be like that, or all that. Mental well-being, there are questionnaires to talk about it. Social well-being, society itself is a yardstick to measure the social well-being. When I say social well-being, it is individual social well-being. It is not about the world outside. Why I'm saying this is, there are people who are extremely wonderful social well-being when they're at home. People at home love them, but the moment they go outside, that's where they show their real colors. The same way some people are there in the society, wow, so very well mannered, such wonderful well-being they show. But the moment they come home, the people at home, that they feel that a terrorist has come home. Why it is like that? Because the simple thing is that social well-being is not his. It is with reference to the world outside. No, what health wants is that it should be your social well-being, whether it is you are in the office or work, whether you are in the house or on the street, whether you are on the plane or whether you are walking on the street. Anywhere that your social well-being should be something which is of your own. So this is what is the social well-being. All these things are okay, but when it came to the spiritual well-being, then there was no particular yardstick. So people started giving their own yardstick to understand about the spiritual well-being. Somebody said a real spiritual well-being when you have a vertical mark. Somebody said, no, on the forehead you have horizontal mark. That's what is spiritual well-being. Which is right, which is wrong. A particular kind of a hairstyle is a spiritual well-being. And somebody else said, no, you should leave a small little choti, that is the tuft on your head. That is what is a spiritual well-being. Somebody else came up and said that, come on, shave the whole head. That's what is a spiritual well-being. Each one having his own definition, which is right, which is wrong. Similarly, a particular kind of a dress is spiritual well-being. Put a long robes of white and shining and all that. That's what is a spiritual well-being. Somebody said, no. If it is ochre robe, that's what is a spiritual well-being. We have seen that people, mile away, a ochre robe person is coming. They go to a sashtang and dandavat pranam here itself. They don't even bother about what is there under the cloth. But this is how basically people had their own definitions. But that's okay. But real problem came when somebody said that a spiritual well-being is when I kill you in the name of religion, spirituality, That is spiritual well-being for you and for me also. Jihad. Immediately they had to calm the spiritual well-being. They said, let's not open it up because this is going to create a chaos. And they did several seminars. We also were part of the seminar. After all those things, they have opened up that spiritual well-being as a part of definition. I don't want to get into that. Let's keep it under suspense for a while. Curiosity, let it remain. But before going to that, I will take up more important issue, and that is health definition is so lofty. It is not, it is sickness is the lowest level, absence of sickness, and beyond that, physical well-being, social well-being, like that, it has so many different levels. But then the definition is so lofty. Can you go back to the previous one only? And the management is at the first level. That is, if you have a sickness and there is somebody to manage you. If you go to a good friend of yours who is a medical doctor and that fellow asks, how are you doing? And then you say that I'm doing fine. Do you have any issues, sickness? So I don't have any issues. Then immediately will ask you, why are you wasting your time and my time? Because I'm here sitting for taking care of sickness. And I'm not taking care of you, I'm taking care of sickness. Yeah, medical management is for the sake of sickness, not for the health. So this is what is the gap between the definition and the management. Mullah Nasruddin, a friend brought his uncle to Mullah and said, my uncle is suffering from diarrhea. Mullah said, I have a wonderful medicine, give him 3 times a day for 2 days. Diarrhea will stop. And that fellow went away with that medicine. A month later, Mullah met his friend in the market and asked his friend, Mullah asked his friend, how is your uncle doing? And that person said, my uncle is no more. Mullah asked him that that's all right, but did his diarrhea stop or not? Because my interest is in diarrhea. I'm treating the diarrhea. See, that's what you see. Medicine, if you have acid problem, they have antacid. If you have bacteria problem, they have antibacterial, that's what we call as antibiotic. So they have nothing to do with you. They have to do with their sickness, with the sickness. This is not what I said. This is what the World Health Organization said about this. American Medical Association, they realized this aspect of it. They pointed out way back. And then they were looking at what is that which will bring in the health at all these personality level. Anything that you introduce, that's why from that time onward, this idea of gym, start this, go for exercise, go for walk, healthy food. But you know, all these things are the piecemeal kind of events. That means to say solutions. One can take care of only at the physical level, one can take care of your food, but there is nothing which can address at that whole system. That's the reason why we require the Indian philosophy where the idea of yoga, which not only addresses at the physical level, at the whole personality level, that's what Indian philosophy addresses that. So how that yoga and Indian philosophy will take care of it, let's go to see that in the next coming slide. There, in fact, very beautiful, as I said, next slide please. And then I said that the first thing that let me give you in this idea that we have always addressed the health, not the sickness. And what is the health? We say that swastha is health. That means when you are in yourself, that's what is supposed to be health. When you are away from yourself, that's what is aswastha. In fact, our whole knowledge is about the health. That's why we have the whole medical science of Indian philosophy is called as Ayuhu Veda. Ayu means health, Veda is the knowledge. Particularly when you look at Charaka Samhita or the Sushruta Samhita, you look at them, they don't look like medical books, that is their modern medical books, but they look like more of the Vedanta Veda texts. That's why they are called as Upaveda or Vedanta. That means basically health is our own nature. Nobody needs to give us health. In fact, actually, health comes in English also, word comes from healing. And healing, nobody can give you. Healing is your own property, your own nature. The consciousness, our deep inner nature itself is healing. Look at the way that if you have some fracture in the hand and then the doctor will put the bones, align them together and then put a plaster. And then will put your hand into a sling. And he will only say, don't move this hand for the next 6 weeks or 8 weeks so that bone heals by itself. The doctor will never say, I'm healing your bone, because he is not healing. The bone itself is healing. You elevate ambience, opportunity to see that healing takes place. Healing is within you. Any surgery, anything that is done, healing has to be done by ourselves. That health and healing is our own nature. And going away from our nature is sickness. That's why being in our own nature itself is health, and going away from our nature itself is a sickness. There may be several reasons by which that we go away from our nature. So when you look at this definition, very simple conclusion is that therefore, any practice that will take you back to your nature is supposed to be the methodology that you do it. The whole thing is not to give you the health, because health is your own nature, but provide a natural environment for you and nature for you in such a way that the healing takes place. That's why when we started our center in Prashanti, in our Vyasa, we call it as Arogya Dhama. Arogya Dhama means that your own health home, in English we call it as health home. But when I go abroad, various countries, if I tell them that we have a Arogya Dhama health home, nobody will understand. I have to speak in their language. So I go there and then tell them that we have a 200-bed hospital, 300-bed hospital, where we do purely yoga therapy. And that impresses them. Wow, we thought one case here, one case there about yoga therapy. You say 200-bed hospital where you do yoga therapy and the patients come and live there? Yes. One of our doctors was so excited. He said, I want to see that. And then he came with me. And I came from Houston. He came from Houston all the way to Bangalore. And then I put him in our Arogya Dhama. And then 2-3 days I was in Bangalore taking care of a few things, and then went back along with his friend. He was living in Bangalore, but he came there. Both his friend and me and my friend from USA, Texas. And then we were all sitting together and then driving somewhere in Bangalore. And then he said, this is such a wonderful place, such a lovely place. I never knew about this place. Only when Raghuram came to Houston, I came to know about it. And you are in Bangalore, you don't even know such a place exists. And then he explained, actually Raghuram came to me and said that they have a 200-bed hospital, yoga hospital, where they manage everything with yoga. I wanted to see that hospital and I came here, and I'm staying here in Arogya Dhama last 3 days. I think one of these days he will take me to that hospital. When he said that hospital, immediately I realized, what do you mean by that hospital? You told no that you have a 200-bed hospital. I said, where you are staying is a hospital. What? It's a hospital? Yes. How can I believe that it's a hospital? Because people get up at 5 o'clock, do yoga and do all these things and do kriyas, and then they do the routine work until about 9 o'clock in the evening, and then they go to the bed. Nobody looks sick. I said, that's most important. We take away from their mind that they are sick. And then all that is that they are healthy, and then sickness is a little deviation. Get back to your nature. That's why we provided nature around, natural food style, natural food habits. This is what Ayurveda said. Whether it is said that achara, vichara, vyavahara and all those things, it is nothing but a natural lifestyle. That's what we provide. People will become healthy. See, present day hospitals are like that, where you go to the hospital to see one of your friends who is sick. You stay for half an hour with him around that hospital, and then after half an hour you start feeling, I think I should also need to take one MRI. Whereas you come to Prashanti, where everybody is healthy, and then you feel that, wow, you are also healthy, you don't need it. So that means to say the change in the psychology, that's what is very important. Now let us see this way. Going back to our nature is healing or the health. What is that the way that we have come away from our nature and how to go back? This is where basically the philosophy of yoga involves. So let's go to the next level slide, and which shows that this going away from our nature is not one time that happened. One time that we go away from our nature, this is what we call it as an incident. Deviate from our own. Like for example, you are very relaxed, you are comfortable, you are peaceful, but suddenly somebody says that there is a snake coming in that direction. In your, wow, at once your BP goes up, your heart rate goes up, your heart palpitations start. All these things are just one incident triggered by some object outside. But when this repeatedly, these instant habits, this is what we call it as habit. So after all, what happened is that Going away from our nature, which is supposed to be an incident, repeatedly happening becomes a habit. But then, even if his habit do you not come back, then continuously that habit continues for some more time. And this is where the habit percolates deep into us, becomes what is called as in Sanskrit as vasana. What is the difference between habit and vasana? Habit is essentially tendency to go towards that. Like for example, smoking is a habit. You feel like smoking, or particularly people have a cup of coffee in the morning as a habit. So when you get up, first thing that you see is where is the coffee available. Now people when come to Prashanti, our center, everything in the evening that they come, everything is looking beautiful, nice food and then nice kitchen and all that. Real problem comes when they get up in the morning. When they get up in the morning, first thing is, where is coffee available? I said 5 kilometers from here. Wow, there is no coffee. And then you feel restless. That means that you are habituated to coffee. And people say that. But then after about 3-4 days, they said, I never thought that I can live without coffee. And now I see how wonderful it is. So a habit can be reversed. But for some people, the habit goes deep into our system. And that's when it becomes vasana. Vasana means it affects your system. Like the way that people come after 3-4 days and then say that, look, I feel I'm constipated being in Prashanti. Why? Because the morning there is no coffee and my bowel system does not function. When you are born, your mother did not carry a breast full of coffee for you. Your bowel system used to work. Today, why it's interfered with that? Because your own system is interfered with any of your habits. But then when you do not correct it at that level, it goes much deeper. And that's what is, it comes to the genetic level. That's when we call it a samskara. But then this gives a very good indication for us. We know very well, any habit we can reverse it. Habit does not stay with us forever. We reverse it. If habit can be reversed by consciously working against it, vasanas can be reversed, samskaras can be reversed. That's why yoga is something which can take away your bad samskaras, instill in you good samskaras. This is what our shastras have always said. So all that what we need to do is to say that a habit and vasana is developed unconsciously. A conscious practice of reversing is what is required. Therefore, what we do here is a conscious process of reversing whatever that you have come away from your nature. Now, what is that we have come away from our nature? And that's what you can see in the next slide. That what are we? This is a very important inquiry that our Upanishads have given us. Extraordinary, wonderful revelation by the scriptures. It's a beautiful discussion that goes on between the student and teacher. And the student asks the teacher, who am I? I'm cutting short all the discussion that is there. But the teacher says that, why are you asking me who am I? Tell me who you are, what you understand as by you. Then I say whether it is okay or not okay. Because it's your own experience what you are. This is what is called as, in classical language, if I say, it is Atma Pariksha or Swarupa Pariksha. But otherwise, it's inquiry into the human being. You are the human being, inquiry into you. There are essentially two ways this inquiry into human being went on in the world. One is the way that I look at human being from outside. When I look at from outside, all that I see is the physical body. And there's some mechanism that is working inside. When I cut open the body, I can see that. This is what I know. Only when somebody like Sigmund Freud came, they said, oh, he's not just only physical body, but he's also mind. Therefore, soma is the physical body, psyche is the mind. So psychosomatic, that's what is the human being. So therefore, human being exists at two levels. One is the body and the other is the mind. That's supposed to be the latest kind of inquiry about the human being. That's why we have the latest medicine in the world as the mind-body medicine, our body-mind problem, our psychosomatic. So this is what is the research that's going on. They have not gone beyond the two levels. Whereas Indian philosophy looked at human being at 5 different personality levels called Panchakosha. How did they find out? It is because that their method of inquiry is not looking at human being from outside, and they started looking at human being from within. So outside inquiry is what is the modern science does. Internal inquiry is the way that Indian philosophy proceeded. And I can't look at somebody else from inside. I can only look at myself from inside. So therefore, when I look at myself from inside, that's what the teacher suggested to student. Look into yourself and tell me what you are. Tapasa Brahma Vijñāsasva. There tapas means basically stop external inquiry, look inwards. This is not my definition. Adi Shankaracharya gives this definition. And naturally, now you don't have to worry about the student. You can also look into yourself and come to report. And the way that whatever the student has found out, you can also find out. The student comes back to the teacher. Bhrugu is the student. Varuna is the teacher. He comes to the teacher and says that, yeah, I found out that I'm this physical body. But the teacher says, find out further. Why? Because you are only in physical body is only outer cover. You are, say, somebody behind using the physical body. That's why we say my hand, my leg. That means say you are not leg. You are using the leg. It's like my pen and my shirt and my pants, like that. It is my hand and my leg. So therefore, and we also say, I have seen with my own eyes. That means you are not the eyes, you are an instrument. Eyes are only instrument. So therefore, the student is convinced that he has to look into himself. And then another thing that he found out is that whatever that is responsible for all the activities is supposed to be life force, which is supposed to be prana. Oh, I am the pranamaya kosha, I am the prana. Using the physical body, Annamaya Kosha. Annamaya Kosha means made out of food. But then I am the prana behind it and I am using this physical body. Maybe he came across a dead body. People are sitting around the dead body crying. He said, why are you crying? And they said, the person is no more. And then he asked, why do you say no more? I see all parts is there, hands are there, legs are there, eyes are there, ears are there. And he is nicely sleeping. No. 2 hours ago, his life was there. Now life is gone, he is gone. So therefore, what we are not the physical body, but we are the life force behind this physical body, which is called as prana. As long as prana is here, I'm here. The moment prana leaves, however strong this physical body may be, I'm gone. I'm not there in this body at all. Not only that, even in this body where prana is not there, I'm not there. Look at your hair. Prana is not there. That's why you cut the hair, you clip the hair, you do all kinds of things, you don't get hurt. Whereas while cutting there, somebody touches your ear, then immediately you realize, oh, you are touching, you are hurting me. Me comes because of prana. Similarly, your nails. Nails are the dead part of the body. Therefore, you clip the nails, it doesn't hurt you. While clipping the nails, you touch the skin, that fellow yells. Why? Because that prana is there, so you are there. We know that. It's our simple common experience. But look at the amount of money and time we spent in maintaining hair and nails. Wow. In fact, I heard recently that after this COVID lockdown condition in America, they said that they have opened up saloons, the hairdressing saloons. They said, my friend from USA called, that saloon booking is not available for next 6 months. Wow. I mean, I found out first time something more important than the COVID-19. Why? Because we feel that that is the body we are. Student, when he says that I found out I'm not the physical body, but I'm the life force personality, that is pranamaya kosha. But the teacher said many times physical body is there, prana is there, but you are not there. How? Don't we see that many times we are going on the street thinking of something else? Body is there, prana is also there, but somebody calls you Raghuram, you don't even hear it. And next day when you meet him, he says, hey, yesterday I called you and you didn't even turn towards me. Oh, maybe I was somewhere else. That means wherever mind goes, we are, and where the mind is here, I'm here. If the mind is here, I'm here. If the mind is not here, I'm not here. So therefore, what am I? I'm the manomaya kosha, mental personality. The student is excited, comes back to the teacher and says that I found out I'm the mental personality. But the teacher is equally neutral to that. He said, find out further. Idea is you are not wrong, because after all you are talking about from your own experience. But if you further go deep into you, you see that you are not the mind. You are the boss of the mind. You are somebody who controls the mind. What is that which controls the mind? Not very difficult to understand that. If mind goes here and there, don't you tell your mind to be here? Like for example, you are going on a road and then you need to take a particular exit on a particular road. You do not want to miss that street. And then somebody is next to you talking to you in the car, and you tell, can you keep quiet so that let me put my mind on the traffic. Let me put my mind on the street. That means I'm the boss putting the mind on the street. I am the boss. Not only we do it, even the children. We tell the child, put your mind here because we are doing this math. So you are the boss of the mind. You are not mind. Mind is an instrument in your hand. What is that I? A very simple answer is that I'm the intellectual personality. As long as the intellect is there, intellect is guiding. And that's what we are. In fact, we identify ourselves with the intellect. People say, who are you? I say, I'm an engineer because my intellect is trained in engineering. I'm a doctor because my intellect is trained in medicine. I'm a lawyer. I'm an architect because whatever my intellect is trained, that's what I am. So we identify ourselves with the intellect. The student is excited. He has no boundaries. And then he comes to the teacher and says, I'm the intellectual personality. Vijnanam brahmeti vyajanat vijnanadheva khalu iman bhutani. But the teacher says, find out further. You are not intellect, you are somebody subtler, deeper, greater than intellect. My God, he could not believe that there is something which is deeper than intellect. Not only he, but look at the world thinkers, whether it is Schopenhauer, whether it is Karl Marx, Confucius, Aristotle, everybody has assumed that intellect is the highest level. There is nothing beyond the intellect. But only the Upanishad teaches us there is something which is beyond the intellect. Not only that, but it is there in your experience. And you are guided by that. And that's what you are. Nobody else is guiding you. You are guiding yourself. And that's what is deeper than that. What is that? Like many times, intellect says, do it or don't do it. But how many of us we follow that? We don't follow that. Intellect keeps saying that, hey, don't do that. But we still continue to do something which we are not supposed to do it. Like when I was in engineering work, I had a colleague of mine, he was a brilliant engineer, and the topmost intellect he was. And he was smoking. And I told him, Arre Baba, you are an engineer, you are intellectual, and then don't you know that smoking is bad for your health? And you are a role model for everybody. Particularly engineers are very good when you tell them in terms of statistical numbers. So I tried to convince him saying that, 59% of the lung cancers are because of the smoking. So therefore you are in the high risk range of lung cancer. That's what the medical report said. He said, Raghuram, 56 was earlier statistics. Revised statistics show it is 82%. See, he corrects my intellect, but he goes for smoking. Why? That means to say intellect can only advise. Beyond that, it will not. Intellect is like the signboard that comes in front of smoking saying that smoking is carcinogenic, it causes problem. Like that. But finally, the business that shows that people did not reduce in smoking. Why do they go? And he also has an answer for that. I went on telling him several times the good advice, don't smoke. Any good advice you tell anybody, 3-4 times later that he gets irritated. One day he got irritated, countered me saying that, Raghuram, you always advised me not to smoke. Have you ever smoked? I never faced that question. Nobody asked me that question. So I was taken aback. I said, no, I never smoked. Immediately he has an upper hand. He said, you advised me not to smoke because you don't know the maja of smoking, the joy of smoking. See, that answer clearly shows it's not the intellect which is guiding him. Nobody else is guiding him, but it is the ananda which guides everybody. Ananda dhyeva khalu imani bhutani jayante anandena jatani jivanti anandam prayanti abhisampi. So your nature itself is ananda, and that's what is guiding all your activities. How do you say my nature is ananda? Ananda, happiness seems to be coming from outside? No, look at your sleep state. Every night, religiously you go to sleep. And what is the experience of sleep? I had a wonderful sleep. I really enjoyed my sleep. In fact, many times people sitting in my lecture say, your lecture was wonderful because it did not disturb my sleep. See, sleep is so wonderful and we touch that, and that's our own nature. No object from outside is coming and disturbing our nature. So therefore, deep inside your very nature is happiness, and that's what you are touching in the sleep. Saisha, Bhargavi, Varani, Vidya, the moment that the student finds out his nature is that blissful state, he was blissful. And that's what our own nature. All these personality level, they are not like onion peels. They are not like watertight compartments. They're all degrees of subtleties within you. The subtlest part of you is that Ananda. The grossest part of it is what is called as the physical body. So essentially what happens is we are identified with the external gross part, but we have not gone deep inside. Next one, next slide. So at every personality level, we have come away from our nature. Next slide, please. And there I show at the physical personality level, our body is completely relaxed. Look at the children are given in the natural state, and then that's what is at the body level. We real. Look at the children; they're so relaxed. Walk relaxed, run relaxed. They fall relaxed. While falling, also they don't have any tension. Whereas we were also like that when we were children. But as we have grown up, tension is the way that we come away from our nature. A simple example for that is look at every child. 3-4 months child, you put them in the lying down position. The simple pastime of the child is to take the big toes and put it in the mouth. You see everywhere in the world. Any cross section of the people that you can see, the child takes the big toes and put it in the mouth. Child becomes like a ball. When you look at that image of the child holding the toes in the mouth, so wow, is it relaxing position? You fear, but the child is so relaxed. We were also doing like that when we were children. But as we have grown up, that whole relaxed state has gone away from us. People come to the yoga class, they say, come on, let's do Padahastasana. Bend forward and touch the toes. How many people do not see the toes because of Madhya Pradesh? But then even those who see the toes, they ask me, those toes? And Baba, your own toes, I'm telling. It's not somebody else's toes. They said, my hands do not go below the knees. How can I hold the toes? I said, but as a child that you are putting your toes in your mouth, what happened to you now? Because that time I had no tension. But today, my muscles are tense, my joints are tense. Therefore, I cannot bend down to touch the toes. I can do the social service. I can put my toes in somebody else's mouth. We have come away from our nature in the form of tension. At the prana level, our nature was to be slow. Show me one child in the world who is fast. Slow. You take them. I go to the shopping mall, I see mother shouting at the child. Again, time and again, saying, come walk fast. And every child says, yes, I'm coming, but no action shown. Put him into the bathroom, he does not come out. Slow. Putting into the closet to search for the clothes, never comes out for half an hour. You see, everywhere slowness. We were also like that when we were children. But as we have grown up, speed is the way that we come away from our nature. We are fast in everything. We can't do anything slow. In fact, somebody is saying something, we don't even have that patience to listen to what he says. Even before he finishes his sentence, we keep talking about it. We are so fast. It is like, a TV talk show where everybody is talking, nobody is listening. It happens like that because we are so fast. At the mind level, a calm state of mind was our nature. But look at the way that we come away from our nature. Agitation, worry is the way that we come away from our nature. We keep worrying whether it is necessary or unnecessary. And there is nothing to worry. We sit down and worry. Why I'm not worrying about anything? Am I missing something? And not only that we worry, we want others also to worry. See, in Prashanti, where I was, counseling people, husband and wife came to my counseling session. And then initially, both of them talked together. After initial 10 minutes of talk, the wife told husband, you go out because I want to talk to Raghuram personally. And the poor husband fellow went out. And the lady's question was, Raghuramji, my main worry is my husband doesn't worry. See, he doesn't worry becomes your worry. This is so. Worry is the way that we come away from our nature. At the intellect level, we had so many wrong notions, fixations. This is right, this is wrong, this is okay, this is not okay, this way to be done, this way not to be done. My God, we fix ourselves in so many boundaries, framework. This is what is the way that we have come away from our nature with wrong notions. And at the emotion level, emotional imbalance is the way of our nature. As a result of it, deep inside, at Anandamaya level, at the bliss level, our nature was to be in harmony. Look at the whole nature, there is harmony in that. You look at the plant, the roots in the soil, flowers in the foliage in the sky, they are in such wonderful harmony. The harmony is there between various species on this earth. They live so harmoniously. Children, they have such a wonderful harmony. When they are hungry, they eat food. Otherwise, they don't. They play with the food. Mothers worry, come on, eat, eat, eat. They no hunger, that's why they don't. There is a harmony. We also had harmony. But look at the way that over a period of time, we come away from that harmony in the form of disharmony. Today we eat because it is time to eat, or because it is nutrition, it is good, it is this, it is that. Not because that we are hungry, therefore we eat. Nothing like that. We have come away from our nature. So far away at the bliss level, we have come away from our nature that a simple sign of bliss is to have a smile on the face. A simple sign of a bliss is to have the smile on the face. But we are so far away from that smile. Today the cameraman has to keep the camera ready and make a request, please smile. As if we are smiling for his sake, for his benefit. In fact, sometimes people ask, how long should I smile? Come on, take the picture fast. Smiling is your own nature. We forgot about that. So therefore, sickness is going away from your nature. Look at the way, whenever you are anxious, whenever you are anxiety, whenever you are stomachache or something like that, you are in the tension, you are in the speed, you are in the agitation. These are all the things which are the sign of sickness. Whereas the situation of relaxing, slowness, calmness was the way that go back to health. And what is that conscious way of going back to your relaxation at the body level is what we call it as asanas. The very definition of asana is sthira sukham asanam. You know very well, sukha means relax. And that's what is asana. But many times people miss it so much that they come and ask me that I have done 1 hour yoga. Now I need to relax. And the very yoga means to relax. They have missed that point. A conscious process of slowing down at the prana level is pranayama. Shwasa prachvasayor gatir vicheda prana. Gati means speed. Vicheda, cut down the speed. Slow down the prana. That's what is pranayama. A conscious process of calming the mind is the purpose of meditation. Similarly, Jnana Yoga and Bhakti Yoga work at your intellectual and emotional level. At all these levels, various practices of yoga will help you to go back to your nature. Blissfully you do the activity. Blissfully doing the activity is what we call as Karma Yoga. This is what Swami Vivekananda said, that every personality level, we need to go back to our own divinity, which is our own nature. Each soul is potentially divine. And then we go back to our nature by Raja Yoga, Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, Bhakti Yoga. This is what is said by work, worship, philosophy, psychic control. The next slide. So therefore, yoga is a conscious process of going back to our nature. Now let me give the whole schematic program about various therapies that are available in the nature and where the yoga therapy stands, where the Ayurveda stands. Core of our nature itself is health. This is what we have seen. Look at the central dot that we have in the spiral. That's what is our health. And nobody needs to give us health. We are healthy ourselves. If somebody who has that practices which are congenial to your health, then there is no reason for any sickness at all. You are going back to it. And what is yoga? The first step is going back to your nature. So when you are come away from your nature, that is when we apply yoga to see that you go back to your nature. So first thing that we apply when we are sick is supposed to be yoga, which will bring you back to your nature. That is the definition Patanjali he gives, saying that yoga chittavritti nirodha tatha drashtuhu swarupe avasthanam. You go back to your nature. What is vritti doing? Vritti sarupya mitartraha, taking you away from your nature. Then what happens is that if you have further gone away from your nature, then some natural practices will bring you back to your nature. A simple yoga will not help. Therefore, we have some natural practices. Not only we, the whole nature does that. Like for example, when you look at, you have a pet dog or a cat, when the stomach is upset, the dog will not eat food. The cat will not eat food. It does the fasting. And what is fasting? It's a naturopathy technique. or it drinks a lot of water and then purges so that it comes out of that sickness. These are all the naturopathy practices. When we give them in a system, that's what is naturopathy, which are not supposed to be our own natural practices that are there day to day. And that's what we enhance in the form of either lankanam or eating certain kind of thing, or only that water diet that we are. So things like that. But when we come away from our nature further, then we try to introduce certain natural substances which are called as the herbs, and that's what is Ayurveda. Ayurveda, the very medicine is, it's not a medicine, but it's something like whatever the natural product that is there in the nature outside, a healthy combination of them works on you to see that you go back to your nature. And this is what Ayurveda text says, that the whole practice of Ayurveda is not to fight the sickness, but it is to improve the health. It is like the way that Birbal story that Akbar asked how to make this line big. He says that the small, he says you draw a big line in front of it so that this line becomes small. You don't even touch that. The same way, you try to enhance your health portion so that the sickness will come down. You are healthy. And that all the support system that in the Ayurveda that you have is to see that how it can enhance your health. If that also does not work, then we introduce a chemical in your body externally. That chemical introducing in your body is what the modern medicine does. In fact, modern medicine itself says like that. They have found out this particular molecule which can work against this bacterial problem that you have. Today also they're trying to find out what is that one particular molecule, one particular formula which can work against the COVID. So the whole idea is to see that a chemical works on your system, nothing wrong about it. But before that, you have tried yoga, naturopathy, Ayurveda, then you come to the modern medicine. Sometimes it will happen that you may not have enough time to do all those things. Then you take the modern medicine. Indian philosophy is never against anything. Anything. And that can be there. We have systems also which talk about that. If you have gone beyond that, then what is the next alternative is you cut out that portion of the body or remove that part of the body which is trying to spread its sickness everywhere else. That's what is surgery. So surgery comes as the last option. But today you go to a doctor with a back pain, immediately he looks at you and says, I think you need to undergo a back surgery. And you say, alternative? They say, yeah, take these medicines, as if that's an alternative. And the last alternative is go for yoga. Whereas Indian philosophy says that is the first thing. So main medicine is yoga and Ayurveda. Alternative medicine is modern science and philosophy, because basically that this is not only working at the physical level, but all these personality levels. As I said earlier, we are not different personality levels like watertight compartments. One influences the other, like our mind influences the body, body influences the mind. In fact, the day when you are sick at the body level because of some reason or the other, that day your mind cannot function, you need to take rest. So therefore, we are a composite complex personality, holistic personality. Therefore, the yoga also we should apply as an integrative approach of yoga, the whole personality as one particular part of yoga. And therefore, basically, as I have given in this particular table, our nature is core, and that is what is health. Yoga is that very definition to get back to our nature. Tatha drashtuhu swarupe avasthanam. And naturopathy is the natural methods which will bring you back to your nature. Then comes Ayurveda, where the natural substances that we use, natural herbs and natural these things that we use to get back to your nature. After that, specific chemicals work on us. That's what is the modern medicine. And surgery is the last resort. This is the clear picture, the clear scheme of the medical practice that we need to do. If this has to happen, then we need to take the world exclusive world. We need to take the yoga and Ayurveda exclusive to the world. And there is no other system anywhere in the world, any nook of the corner of the world, which can really help us to go back to that nature. Next slide. So therefore, today that when you look at the most ancient technique, next slide please, the most important system of management of health and well-being, we need to have this understanding, not only from the say, point of view of modern medicine, but you look at that, this what ancient sages have been, it is more modern than the modern modality of technique that is there. Now, medical science has come to almost like a wall. They're back to the wall where they can't go further ahead. All those things are there. And the more and more that you are giving medicines, people are losing their immunity against medicines, and then they are not able to function with that. So it is high time that we spread to the world outside that to take care of health is our own onus of responsibility, and that we can do. One important thing that I said is that it's a conscious process of going back to your nature. That's what is yoga. So yoga has these two components. One is the awareness and the other is the relaxation. The relaxation portion is one thing, is going back to our nature, but awareness is a conscious process of going back to our nature. A conscious process. There is no way that you can practice yoga without your awareness. It is like the way a physical activity, you can put some music going on in your ears, or you can run the news show on the TV and then you can do the physical exercise. Yes, you can do it. Physical exercise does not require your involvement, whereas yoga requires your involvement. That is the reason why it is very important to see that while doing yoga, the teacher is giving instruction. Inhale deeply while you bend back. Exhale when you bend forward. Who has to do it? You have to do it. Similarly, yoga teacher gives an instruction, relax your calf muscle, relax your thigh muscle. Who has to do it? You have to do it. Therefore, the whole of yoga is a self-management technique. And this is like a spiral that we have, and the spiral, that's what I've shown in the form of beautiful shankha that is there. And this, in the next one is that yoga is a upward spiral journey. This is actually the spiritual growth is upwards. The bottommost level at the physical level, when we are there, it's supposed to be the gross level. When we identify ourselves with the bliss, it is supposed to be the highest level. Therefore, in our culture, that people who are adept in yoga, who are extraordinary in yoga, we gave them the name called Ananda. The whole idea of Ananda is that they are personified with the Ananda. Vivekananda, Brahmananda, Dayananda. You know, that itself shows that you are identified with the Ananda. You are not identified with the body. So there are two types of people who are there. That one is the people who identify themselves with the body, and once in a while they are in Ananda. The other category of people are people who are always identified with the body, with the Ananda. Once in a while they come to the body level when it is absolutely necessary. Children are like that. You look at the children, they are always happily playing. They come to the body level when they are hungry. Otherwise, they don't have that body level consciousness. They're identified with their bliss. One last anecdote I will tell and then stop it here at this level. That is, long time ago when Prashanti was small, there were about 70, 80 people, 100 people used to be there. I finished my lunch in the afternoon and then I was walking to my home, and between the dining hall and then my home, there is a playground. And all the children were playing. And my attention went on to a young fellow, about 7, 8-year-old, my cook's son. He was also playing with them. My attention went to him specifically because that he had a cut on his knee and blood was coming out of the knee. That cut. You know, natural instinct is there, you know, stop him, ask him to see that, you know, we have cut here. But the next moment, I felt happily playing. He is not bothered about that. That means that he is not at the body level. He's identified with the bliss, blissfully playing. So let me keep watching him for the next, watching him to see that he will not hurt again on that hurt. If he really gets hurt, then let me come to his rescue. As long as he's playing, let him do it. For half an hour he was playing, the other children were playing, everything was happy, I was watching him, everything is going on. After half an hour, suddenly his mother finished her work in the kitchen, came out. You can just imagine what will happen to the mother when she sees the child with a cut on his knee and then playing around. Immediately from there she shouted, "Hey, stop playing and come here." And that boy was also very strong. And he said, "Mom, don't disturb me." He shouted from there. But then the strong lady, she came in his way, stopped him, held him tight, showed him his knee, and said, "Look at your knee, blood is coming out." When he looked at the knee, that is when he came back to his body level consciousness. He said, Oh, mom, it's paining. I can't walk. Lift me up. Arey, poor fellow. He was playing for half an hour without complaining about that. Suddenly, why it has come? Because your awareness come to the body level, then you recognize all the problems at the body level. Therefore, the whole spiritual practice is to see that how you de-identify yourself from the body level. Annamaya Matmanam Upasankramati. Pranamaya Matmanam Upasankramati. The whole practice of yoga is to see that you de-identify yourself from the body level, go to a deeper level. De-identify yourself with the prana level, go to subtler level. That's why this yoga is such an extraordinary spiritual practice that we are introduced into. This is what is the spiritual well-being. A spiritual well-being is where you are so harmonious because you are one with this divinity itself, blissful, harmonious, happy that you are. That is what is the definition of spiritual well-being, which I stopped at that level. Let us keep it in suspense. And that's what is Anandamaya Kosha level. When you are that harmony, that is what is a really spiritual level of well-being. Now look at that definition. If you really fulfill the definition with the help of yoga practice, this world will have greater harmony because people are harmonious. Today, look at the way that in the name of spirituality, how much of bloodshed is going on, how many killings are going on, how much of disturbances are going on in the world. So therefore, one very important tool to see that this world behaves like one family, Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. If that has to happen, health is a wonderful attraction. And of that, a definition of health, we improve it with the help of spiritual well-being. And the tool which can give you all these things is the method of yoga and Ayurveda. So the futuristic medicine for the world is that yoga and Ayurveda. Let us take it forward. Thank you so much.
So now we will open up the house for questions. You can type the questions and I can read it out to Raghuramji, or you can raise your hands. There is a way of putting your hands up technically. So if you can do that, then we can unmute you so that you can ask the questions. I think we already have a couple of questions.
Let me take up this question if you have a couple of minutes for, because a lot of time people have this question about the chakras and all those things.
Sure.
See, let me give a very simple perspective because basically I'm an engineer. So my mind works in a logical way. One of the important ways that the Indian philosophy looks at everything is with the help of analogy. One great analogy that we have taken up is the analogy of a wheel. And wheel, you know, when you look at the wheel, the center of the wheel is something which is fixed, and then the periphery is there which is moving around. And wheel is a contrivance actually which makes the potential energy into a kinetic activity. See, let me make it a little more easy to connect. Like for example, this table is there. I try to move this table. It's really hard. It's very difficult. What is the simplest way I can do it? I can fix wheel under that. And then the moment I push it, it moves. My pushing is a potential energy and it becomes a kinetic activity. It is like that. In our body also, that you want to speak and the pressure created wanting to speak is supposed to be potential energy. And then an imaginary wheel that is there in the throat, and that gives an expression to it. That's what is the kinetic activity. You are sitting and meditating, you are closing your eyes, suddenly a big sound that occurs in front of you. You have all the urge from within, open your eyes and then see what is that sound. That creates a potential energy inside you. But you struggle with that to say that, no, I don't want to open my eyes because I'm sitting for meditation. But then the force is there so much, and what gives an expression is a chakra, Agnya chakra. You just open your eyes a little bit and see that and close your eyes. See, these centers are the centers where the activity can be given an expression. So chakra is that where you give an expression to activity, But exactly another thing is that chakra is also a facility where you apply the brakes on that particular energy also. You take a bicycle, you take anything that you take where the wheel which makes it to move is the wheel that you also apply the brakes on that. So we have two different kind of an activity going on at all these chakras that are there. I don't want to get into that, all the other details and all that. But then you have stomach as one center, and then heart is another center, throat is another center. In between the eyebrows is another center, where an activity comes out, jets out. Whenever an activity just springs out, spring, very word comes from the kind of, you throw a ball, rubber ball, and then it springs up, jets up. And that spring is the same word in English or in Sanskrit also, we have pingala. Pingala is a channel where your activity springs out, whereas you suppress that activity, and that's what is called as Ida. So imaginary idea is that we have two channels. One springs activity from us, pingala. Another is suppresses our activity, which is the Ida. And I want to ask a question, but what will people think? Am I stupid? Therefore, I just suppress my urge to act. When somebody asks a question, immediately, oh, I also had that question, but I didn't ask. See, Ida and Pingala, these are the two channels through which that our energy is flowing, imaginary channels. One is kind to give an expression, another is kind to practice. But both these cases, you are not your master, you are being controlled by the world outside. And the whole time passes, the lifetime passes, without ever you developing a master yourself. Like for example, I'm not hungry, I'm fine. But the moment I see the food, but the food controls your hunger reactions, you start salivating, your stomach starts craving for food. All these things happen because you are not the master. And life goes on like that. So the whole of yoga is to see that how I can stop this Ida and Pingala activity. That means to say, where outside is the master, I control all those things. And then third one is, I develop a center where from the channel where I am the master, and the channel where I am the master is called as Sushumna. So this is a whole language. That's what is the language of chakras and the nadis and all those things. They are not different. In fact, the people who follow this chakra, nadi kind of yoga practices, they also give you the same kind of yoga practice what you are doing. So the practices will not change. The language becomes different. That's the only thing we need to understand that. There's no mystification, the whole thing. You cut open the body, you don't find in the body, some wheels are sitting there. And the most important wheel, the paradigm that we have used, this paradigm, is called as the Kala Chakra. The world is moving on that Kala Chakra. The potential God, Brahman, converted itself into kinetic activity on the basis of this Kala Chakra. These are all the various ideas that are there. I'm touching upon that issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Raghuramji. We have one question from Dr. Ernest Sillens. I think he's the faculty from Latvia University. He says, dear sir, where we can put our ecological well-being, as today it is disastrous in a sense of disbalance for sustainability of human life?
Yeah. Actually, I've been talking about this in few of my talks and all that. Very important is, look at the way that COVID lockdown system has given us such a beautiful opportunity to realize that we can live without eating outside, all the junk food and all those things, we can live. And then we don't have to pollute the world outside. How beautiful it is. I've seen the pictures where people have shown the wild animals are coming on the road and then they're just living happily their life. We could live like that. We don't have to abuse the world outside. We have to learn this particular lesson from the COVID, that we can confine ourselves to home, beautiful homes that we have constructed. And people have spent crores of rupees to build their houses and they're living outside. Is it not foolishness on our part, eating outside and all that? And third is the most important thing is the family system. Parents, children, and everybody sitting together, eating and living a life together. Is it not something wonderful? Actually, I would say that even if whatever that practice that we were doing during the lockdown session time, 20% of it, at least itself, we can translate into the day-to-day life, probably we can be doing a better ecological support that we are doing. So therefore, I subscribe to this idea that be satisfied with yourself. Atmanyeva atmana tushtaha tasya karyam navidyate. As Krishna puts it, let us boldly take that step. Probably we can do better service to the ecology.
We have a question from a friend from Singapore, I guess. Can you reconcile pursuing personal happiness and world responsibility, as you mentioned in your story of the couple, where the wife worries and the husband does not?
Yes, yes. Actually, if you have the peace within you, then you can give the peace to the world outside. What you have within you is the way that you give to the world outside. We are so much eager to give to the world outside, but we don't know, realize that what is the importance within us. So therefore, it's not just what you said as a compromise. The question is basically your need. You equip yourself so that you give to the world outside. And what you equip, once you have it, a situation comes. I'm sure that you will not hesitate because that you are convinced about that. You share with the world outside. That's how all this wonderful knowledge survived for 10,000 years, because that there were people who realized, and also that they have passed on this information to the others. That's why in that mantra which I said about the various 5 different personality level, it says Shrotriyasya cha kamatasya. It is always used for the teacher, somebody who realized himself, who recognized that, passed on that information to the others. So that is what is our responsibility also in this world. Yeah, we need to do that.
Thank you. We have a question on the gunas. Please explain on the gunas. Though gunas seem to be simple, there is so much to know, and especially can you explain it as from the Sankhya philosophy perspective?
Actually, Sankhya philosophy does not take a view of good or bad, right and wrong, and this is okay, this is not okay. They don't have any hierarchy. They said whatever the situation is there, it is like that. Look at the simple way. I mean, I cannot go deep into it because the time constraint. But a very simple thing is that, you divided the matter into 3 different categories: solids, liquids, gases. Indicate certain properties. Solids indicate certain properties, liquids indicate certain, and then gas indicates certain. There is nothing like a hierarchy in that. The same way that when you look at the whole creation, it can be kept into 3 different categories. One is called as Sattva, other is Rajas, and third is Tamas. And then there are a lot of things that are associated with that. Tamas is the one which is like, and just to give an idea about that, the analogy that he uses is a plant. The plant is consisting of roots, which are always under the slush, under the dirt. It's in the darkness. It never sees the sunlight. That's why it is called as tamas. And darkness is also called tamas. So that's what is the plant. The stem or the trunk of the plant is somewhere in between, which is continuously supplying food, supplying this thing, holding the plant tight. That's what is rajas. And the flowers and foliage on the top is sattva. So a plant's health depends on all these 3 things. What is more important thing is not that the roots are only important, fruits are only important, but it is all these 3 things important. But what happens is that a wonderful harmonious blend of all these 3 things is what is the health of the plant. The same way we have also the feet which are on the ground, which are under the tight under boots. So that's what is tamas. The central portion of the is where the food is digested. Full factory that is running inside. The food that you throw into that, it converts into blood, it converts into all those things. And then head, which things and plants and schemes. So rajas and sattva, these are also there. What is more important thing is how harmoniously you work with all these 3 things, sattva, rajas, tamas. If you want to work with all these 3 things in harmonious way, then you should not have an attachment to one or the other. That's why Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, Traigunya Vishayaha Vedaha. Whatever that is there in this world are nothing but all the 3 gunas. Nistraigunya Bhavarjuna. That Bhavarjuna is that your spirit, your consciousness. Hey Arjuna, it is beyond all these 3 gunas. Once we have that 3 gunas beyond that, then we see that we don't have preference for one guna or the other, but we try to work in a harmonious blend of all the 3 gunas. In a simple way, this is what is the idea, but there are a lot of other things also connected with that.
I have a couple of other questions.
Yeah.
How can yoga as a subject be integrated in the school curriculum in a multiracial, multi-ethnic, and multilingual country?
All this explanation I have given for 1 hour of my talk. Not only that, even if I give the lecture on Bhagavad Gita or the Upanishad or any of these texts, I never bring an idea of that what is religion, what is this and all. It's a very, very small little explanation about religious and ethnical, this and that. I've not got any color of the skin in this. I've not got any intellectual level in this. I explained in a simple day-to-day experience. In fact, to tell you very clearly, religion is a word which was not there in this world 1600, 700 years ago. The word itself is born 1600 years ago, and we are talking about the whole of philosophy, which is 10,000 years old. So that means to say, world existed for more than 8,000 years, particularly in our culture, that we existed very harmoniously in a beautiful blend for 8,000 years. We continue it. In fact, that's why at one place Vivekananda beautifully said, the earlier that we get rid of this word called religion, we are better, because more wars are fought in the name of religion than any other cause. Today also, when you look at the world, the amount of violence that's going on in the name of religion is much more than any other cause, any other region. So should we really require those things like ethnic identity and then religion, this and that? I think we should, time has come that we should go beyond that. And yoga is the only tool which does not approach with an idea of religion. Therefore, I gave the whole talk. I talked about health, I talked about yoga, I talked about well-being, all those things. I never brought in one idea about us as a religion.
Very true. We have a last question.
Yeah.
How do we strike a balance between being easily satisfied and content and being highly ambitious? Is ambition bad for spiritual well-being? Kindly guide us.
Ambition is bad for you also. It's not only spiritual growth or anything like that. See, we have an ability to do the activity. We have a tool called intellect, and we have beautiful environment to really provide the nurturing of that intellect and all those things. You can be wonderfully creative. You can be extraordinarily wonderfully producing something which is like a small little simple plant which is there in the soil, which can produce a beautiful colorful rose. Another plant can easily bring about, given an ambience, it can give such thousands of wonderful mango fruits and all that. If all those things can do so much, how much human being can do it? Not just because that you have an ambition or highly stung ambition, but your creativity has to bring about. It is not that restlessness which brings about the peacock to unfurl itself. When the peacock is really joyful, wonderful, the dance that peacock does is the way that unfurls the tail. The same way, let us unfurl our intelligence, let's unfurl our ability. When you do it that way, you will not become a destroyer of the nature outside. In the natural way that you manifest these things. That's what we need to do it.
There is also one more question. Maybe you decide whether you want to take it now or.
Yeah.
Can you please explain the two concepts of Panchakosha and Ritambhara Prajna?
Oh, only one thing that I don't want to get into the details, that a person who is not just only the touch that silence inside, or almost like touching the silence inside. That means to say, please understand that when somebody has touched that level, it doesn't have any axe to grind. It doesn't have any tendency to be followed by. Such a person, when he does an activity, he is not guided by any other vested interest by his activity or by idea that he gives. He is purely guided by the eternal principles or eternal truth. Eternal principle, eternal truth is called as Ritam. So such a person's consciousness, from any direction when you try to look at it, it is only giving an expression to that deep inner Ritam or eternal principles of life. And that's what is basically Ritambhara Tasya Prajna. And the practice of yoga is not just only moving the hands or legs and all that and holding the breath, but it is step by step going to that level where Patanjali indicates once you reach that state, Such a person is not a person who has a seed of various other tendencies that are there governing. That's why it is called as nirbhija. That means there is no bijatva there. Such a person is a person, he says that. Ritambhara tasya prajnaha.
Thank you, Raghuramji. I think with this, we'll close the session.
Right.
It was an wonderful, enlightening session. We had more than 100 people joining us from all over the world, and they have expressed their gratitude in the chat. So they have thanked you profusely, and they look forward to listening more from you.
Thank you.
So we are ready to host you more, as always. Yeah.
I'm also glad.
And many people are asking for the videos. So all these sessions would be recorded and would be posted, made available on the YouTube channel of Indica Yoga. So please look forward to connecting with you all there, and also connect with us for the events that follow. Thank you once again to each one of you for joining us this evening. Thank you. Thank you, Raghuramji.
Thank you.